This is the follow-up video to my last Power Rankings video. In that video, I went through every major arc in part 1 and ranked the top 10 characters based only on what we knew up to that point in the story. So for example, I didn't rank Jiraiya until the Konoha Crush arc, and I only considered what we knew at the time when I placed him. So I took into consideration that he could summon gamabunta, but I did not factor in Sage mode when placing him since we didn't see that until part 2. The video was more or less a peek back into our initial perspectives when we watched the series for the first time. The lists were very general though, as I was working with limited information, and I excluded some characters that I felt were either not significant or had too little information on them. I'm picking up where I left off by starting with the Kazekage rescue arc. If you didn't see part 1 of this series, you should watch that before this one so that you're caught up. The link is in the description. One thing I need to bring up before listing the technicalities for this arc is that I'm not considering what we learned in the Kakashi Chronicles chapters between part 1 and part 2. In the manga, that story happened in between part 1 and part 2, but in the anime, it didn't occur until over 100 episodes in. I'm deferring to the anime here because most people watch that first instead of reading the manga. With all that being said, here's a reminder with where we left off with the last rankings. It's going to be a lot harder this time around because part 1 was very clear cut with who is Kage level and who is not, whereas part 2 increasingly blurs those lines. Once again, I want to give a massive shout out to Thunder God for making these graphics for this video, and the last one. He's been helping me out big time lately with these graphics. The Kazekage rescue arc list is actually not that much different from the last one, so I'm just going to be talking about the list as a whole, and for the most part, instead of going one by one. The changes for this list are that Sasori and Deidara come in at 6 and 7, bumping Kimimaro and Kakashi off the list. In part 1, the successive lists became more and more about who was Sannin and or Hokage level and who was not. Itachi and the 4th Hokage demonstrated that they were above that tier, but after that we had an impervious block of 6 out of the 10 characters. Now that we've reached part 2, we're seeing more of the shinobi world, specifically the antagonist. Sasori wields the strongest Kazekage's powers, and Deidara was able to defeat the current Kazekage without even killing him. What really cements these two infiltrating this tier is that Sasori was preparing to battle Orochimaru. We know Orochimaru used to be in the Akatsuki and wasn't even the strongest member since Itachi was reportedly the reason why Orochimaru had to leave the organization. So that shows that there are other people alive that rival the Sannin that are not Itachi Uchiha. The reason I put these two above Jiraiya and the first two Hokage is that they have better showings. The best we've seen from Jiraiya is his performance in the Sannin Showdown, where he was weakened by Tsunade's drug. When the armless Orochimaru made up his mind on killing Naruto, he easily knocked Jiraiya down in his drug state as well. Sasori, on the other hand, was planning to willingly go fight a healthy Orochimaru. As for the first two Hokage, their jutsu prowess is beginning to fall behind. Kisame's water style with only 30% chakra was exponentially larger than the second's. Sasori's Iron Sand is similar to the first wood style, but the Iron Sand comes across as more lethal considering that it's coated in poison. These two also failed to kill Hiruzen while working together, while Hiruzen was able to blow their legs off with explosive tags and was able to seal them despite being caught under the Bringer of Darkness Genjutsu. I've put Deidara at 7 because he was able to capture the current Kazekage, while Sasori uses the strongest Kazekage ever. Deidara does show plenty more potential than just capturing the Kazekage though. His C3 attacks seem to threaten an entire village, making it the biggest jutsu in scale along with Gaara's Sand so far in the series. So those two can be argued as interchangeable. I just put Sasori ahead because he has the better Kazekage feat. I don't hold him losing to Chiyo and Sakura against him. Chiyo seemed to be the top Jonin of the Sand, and Sakura also has reached Jonin level. These two had the perfect matchup, prior knowledge, and antidotes that only lost because Sasori had a weak spot for his parents. He managed to poison both fighters as well. I still put these two below Tsunade though, as they don't have that coveted Hokage title. That's really the only reason. There's not much to go off to compare these three, so they can be seen as interchangeable. They both show the potential to be stronger, but there's not enough information at the moment to justify bumping Tsunade down. Hiruzen is above everyone below him though, because he took down the first two Hokage, and was said to be the strongest Kage at his death. Chunin exams Orochimaru is still ahead because he survived his fight with Hiruzen. The 4th Hokage is ahead because he's been implied by Hiruzen, Jiraiya, and Anko to be in a league of his own. He also sealed the Ninetales, who is most likely the most powerful being in the world at the moment. Itachi is ahead of the 4th Hokage because Orochimaru says he's in a league of his own as well. The only reason why he gets put above Lord Fourth is that we've actually seen him fight. This arc greatly shook up the series and leaves us with a lot of questions going forward, just like the last arc. I'll start this section by listing the honorable mentions. Kisame showed us very little in his Part 1 appearance, but in his first Part 2 appearance, he shows why he's an Akatsuki member. His water style exceedingly surpasses the second Hokage's despite only using 30% of his chakra. He also makes light work of Team Guy, which included 2 Jonin. It took another honorable mention in Guy to having to open 6 gates to defeat him. The 6th gate makes Guy so physically strong that he can shoot fireballs just by punching the air. That level of power was more than enough to beat this chakra clone, but it does not justify putting him above Jiraiya. It was a heavily weakened Akatsuki member. The same case only goes for Kisame because so far he's only shown that he can defeat 2 Jonin and 2 Chunin, not a Kage. Another honorable mention would be Kakashi. Itachi had said Kakashi could not obtain the Mangekyo Sharingan, but just like we speculated, Kakashi ended up getting much stronger over the time skip. His Kamui is very taxing on his stamina, but it was at least strong enough to damage an off-guard Akatsuki member. It doesn't justify him keeping his spot on the list though, as all he did was damage an unsuspecting Akatsuki member, instead of defeating a Kage like Deidara or wielding a Kage like Sasori. The last honorable mention is Gaara, and he has the best case of cracking the list. The scale of his abilities have continued to grow to the point where they're the biggest in the series almost. He also managed to take Deidara's arm, but Deidara had to prolong that fight because he was not aiming to kill. He also actually has a Kage title too, unlike the other honorable mentions. It would be very justifiable to switch him with Jiraiya because he has a better showing, but I still believe Jiraiya belongs in that tier because his healthy Sonic counterparts are so high. That's everything about the honorable mentions, so back to the changes we've seen in this arc. After the last arc, we began to expect for Team 7 to train hard during the time skip, so they would become stronger. Sasuke's status is unknown, but Sakura made the biggest leap so far. She's now able to crack boulders hundreds of times bigger than her, and can craft antidotes for the most lethal poison in the series. It's a little disappointing that she's a Tsunade clone, but it's definitely better than nothing. I already talked about Kakashi and his new Sharingan, but Naruto was a bit of disappointment in this arc. You would expect his motivations for surviving the Akatsuki and saving Sasuke, coupled with the mentorship of Osani, would produce more. He didn't really get the chance to show off in this arc, so it can be excused to an extent. It's possible he may show more in the next arc, especially since he might be confronting Orochimaru, and even might have a rematch with Sasuke. One thing to worry about though is that Naruto is beginning to lose control of the Nine Tails. His emotions are still the trigger for it, but now it seems he becomes feral once he starts to tap into it. Kakashi was able to stop him at 2 tails in this arc, but Jiraiya has apparently seen it go further than that. We also learned much more about puppet masters and how that looks above Genin level. We even learned that humans themselves can become puppets, allowing for puppet masters to use their jutsus as well. Gaara is now not the only character who can wield sand, and there are other types of sand to wield as well. Another thing we get more insight into is the Mangekyo Sharingan. It was implied to be very costly to use in Part 1, but Kakashi is now exposed that it damages your vision. We also finally learn more about the Akatsuki and their motives. Their goal seems to be to seal-tailed beast, but there's no clear reason why. Most likely to harness their power. We also learn it's a small organization of about 10 members, but that's nothing to scoff at. Here's instead Orochimaru could take down a small nation by himself, and Deidara showed how he could just walk into a village and capture a Kage. This creates a tension over the likelihood that the Akatsuki will eventually hunt down Naruto. Going forward, we're still instilled with a wonder over the Akatsuki. What do they want to do with the tailed beast, and how powerful are these members really? Finally, the biggest offensive jutsu in scale in the series so far is Deidara's C3, which threatened to at least heavily damage a village. The largest defensive jutsu in scale would have to be Gaara's Sand since it did block that attack. Kisame potentially has scale up to par with these two as well. The last thing I want to say before the next arc is that this list is still loose due to the limited information I'm working with. I can at least put these into tiers though. The 4th Hokage and Itachi Uchiha are the unparalleled tier. Chunin exams Orochimaru and Old Hiruzen are the Sannin plus tier. Tsunade, Sasori, and Deidara are the Sannin tier. And the first 2 Hokage and Jiraiya are the Sannin minus tier. You could add Gaara to that tier, but he's still probably out of the top 10 anyway. The next arc is the Tenchi Bridge arc, and this is actually the first arc where the top 10 list won't change whatsoever. This is because this is one of those arcs where the power scaling does not increase from the last one, similar to the Sasuke retrieval arc. It's kind of lame, but there's a new honorable mention and other new things to talk about in the series though. Sasuke is worth an honorable mention as he arguably made the biggest jump out of anyone in Team 7 over the time skip. His genjutsu is now on to the point where he can paralyze Anbu members with fear. His visual prowess has even gotten so strong that he can suppress the Nine Tails for Naruto. He managed to embarrass 4 Jonin one by one in his brief fight in this arc. Naruto and Sai were more or less defeated with one jutsu, and Yamato was paralyzed with one move as well. He also showed that he has some type of trump card jutsu that was powerful enough to force Orochimaru to stop Sasuke from killing Team 7 with it. Just the fact that he can defeat 4 Jonin so easily suggests that he's reaching or has reached the Kage level tier. Even his base physical strength was strong enough to blow a giant hole in Orochimaru's hideout just by powering through Sai's binding snakes. He could even jump straight through Yamato's wood style with no problem either. The other new honorable mention is Madoru Uchiha. This is the second time his name has been brought up, both times justifying why he could crack the top 10. In part 1, Kakashi says his battle with the first Hokage carved the final valley, but no outcome to the fight was given. That alone puts him relative to Lord First. I just haven't included him in the list yet because I feel like he wasn't significant enough of a character to. In this arc, he's mentioned again when the Nine Tails says the last Sharingan he saw was Madoru Uchiha's. What this could mean is up to interpretation. It would likely mean that Madara suppressed the Nine Tails in some capacity just like Sasuke did in this arc. As for what's new in this arc, we meet some new characters and we see some new things from some old characters. Sai is a new character in Naruto's generation and is the only one to be in the Anbu. He also has the very unorthodox arsenal of drawing all of his jutsu. He never really shows what he's capable of, but we do know that he's well below Sasuke. Yamato is the other new character, and he's the only other character than the first Hokage to produce wood style. He doesn't seem to be quite as proficient at it though. Orochimaru and Naruto show us a battle between monsters, as Kabuto would put it. Orochimaru finally shows what it looks like when he goes all out, and it did not disappoint. In fact, he even has fun with this fight, because he comes off as even more immortal than he did before. His oral rebirth jutsu heals all wounds, and he could even reattach his torso when it was cut in half by Foretell Naruto. His fear of death has begun to reflect in his arsenal, considering how absolute his defense is now. As for Naruto, his Nine Tails problem has suddenly become a major issue. When his emotions run high, he gets corrupted by the Fox Spirit's power, resulting in Sakura becoming seriously injured from it on 2 occasions in one fight. This transformation is confirmed to be well above Jonin level when only a 3 Tails Naruto power-up could send Kabuto shooting through the forest. And 4 Tails Naruto was so dangerous that Yamato struggled to get close enough to even watch the fight. Orochimaru also failed to defeat the transformation and he's Kage level. Just 4 out of 9 Tails was too much for a Kage to handle, so just imagine how devastating all 9 would be. Especially since it seems to be more of an exponential increase with each tail. At the end of the arc, Naruto did seem to be better at suppressing the 9 Tails before Sasuke intervened. So possibly going forward, we will see Naruto resist this corrupting power. Going forward, the other only thing we are really left wondering is what will be the result of Orochimaru wanting Sasuke's body. Will he even get the chance to fight Itachi again? It kind of sucks that there were no new changes to the list for this arc, but that's just how it goes when an arc goes sideways power-wise. The next arc is the Akatsuki suppression arc, and this is an arc that doesn't build too much off of the last one power-wise. The main changes we see are Naruto learning the Rasen Shuriken, Team 10 fighting for the first time in Part 2, and 2 new Akatsuki members. This results in the list only changing slightly, with Kakuzu entering at 9, bumping Jiraiya out. At this point in the series, Jiraiya is the last Sannin to not go all out in a fight yet. For all we know, he could be above Orochimaru at 3, but his poor performance in the Sannin showdown holds him back. Eventually he should actually have a serious fight, because since he is so important to the story. As for Kakuzu, I felt like he deserved to be in between the first and second Hokage. The reason I put him under the first is that he said he fought the first. If he had killed him or defeated him, I think he would have noted that. There's no other context to it, but since he didn't beat him, I think it's fair to place him one spot below him. The reason I put him above the second Hokage is that he counters Lord Second's water style by combining fire and wind style. The scale of this jutsu seems to be as large or larger than the second's too. The only thing the second has shown is impressive levels of water style, and the ability to react to Hiruzen some. The reason I can't put Kakuzu any higher is that he did lose to Naruto, who isn't even on this list. To be fair, he did get hit by a jutsu that surpasses the 4th Hokage's. One thing to note about that fight is that Kakashi does not have his Earth-style heart for the entirety of it. This heart was critical because it allowed him to harden his skin as a defense from attacks. The problem is that the most we saw it defend against was a human boulder, so had he used this against a Rasen Shuriken, I don't know if it would have helped, because we don't know the extent of its defense. He still managed to get stepped on by the Two Tails though and ended up winning that fight, and that was without him hardening his skin. So there's a lot of gray area with this Akatsuki member, but onto the honorable mentions. The only one I would really add is Naruto because he has developed a jutsu that surpasses the Two Tails in strength at least. This whole arc was great for him because the first two consisted of him taking L after L. Kakashi even says that Naruto surpassed him at this point too. It's a neat moment, but it does not last because this jutsu damages Naruto so bad that Tsunade prohibits him from using it again. So after his triumph, it just ends up getting reversed and Kakashi's statement is for nothing now. Maybe in the future he'll bring it out in a life or death situation though. This arc expanded on the show's world building and gave us more insight into the Akatsuki. We finally learn of the Akatsuki motives, which is to collect money, create an army of mercenaries, and then use the capture-tailed beast to destroy the 5 great nations. That's just what we know on the surface. I'm sure the leader of the Akatsuki has deeper motivations than just doing this on a whim. Another thing to note about him is his eyes. It's possibly a new dojutsu, considering that it has a pattern to it along with a unique color. Then again, Kurenai has unique eyes, but not a dojutsu. As for the Akatsuki in general, we learn that they can not only capture Kage, but tailed beasts themselves on a regular basis. Data and Tobi capture the 3 tails with little trouble, and Kakuzu and Hidan capture the 2 tails with little trouble either. An interesting thing about the 2 tails is that this is the first time we've seen a shinobi actually control the tailed beast inside them. This makes me wonder if the 2 tails is just submissive to its host, or if it's actually on friendly terms. This fight also shows us that tailed beasts in general aren't as strong as they've been made out to be. In part 1, the One Tail seemed like an unstoppable force that Naruto was fortunate to stop before it fully tapped into its power. It also makes you question how powerful the Nine Tails is, and how impressive it is for the 4th Hokage to seal it. Maybe the human characters are just beginning to get more powerful and bridging the gap that there was in part 1. Back to the Akatsuki though. Shikamaru brings up a good point that every member of the Akatsuki seems to have some type of gimmick that makes them difficult to deal with. Hidan is immortal, Kakuzu survived death twice in his fights, and all the other members have their own unorthodox abilities. To wrap things up with this arc, I'll just list how this arc expanded on power abilities-wise. Naruto's Rasen Shuriken is the first time we see wind style in a while, and we see it at a magnitude that surpasses some tailed beasts in physical power. Kakashi displays the ability to use 4 chakra natures offensively, and at a large level of magnitude. Probably not the most magnitude out of everyone, but he is the most well balanced in that sense. He also shows us the largest levels of raw durability in the series so far by surviving the 2 tails stepping on him, and not immediately dying from a Rasen Shuriken. Hidan's immortality surpasses Tsunade's and Orochimaru's ability to heal through fatal wounds, since it doesn't seem to take any chakra for him to do so. Otherwise, that's really it for this arc. The last few arcs didn't shake up the list much, but the next one did. The next arcs will be bunched up into one since they all flow into each other. These are the Itachi Pursuit mission, the Tale of the Jiraiya the Gallant, and the Fated Battle Between Brothers arc. I'll also be including Kakashi's backstory in this bunch too, since these episodes occurred during this point in the anime. So to recap, this list will start from when Sasuke killed Orochimaru and end when Sasuke captured B. The series just flows so well into each little arc, and here that really just feels like one big arc. Speaking of B though, I put him at number 10. B is unique in the sense that he's the first Jinchuriki since Gaara that we actually see fight the Akatsuki, and he puts on quite the fight considering that he mortally wounded Sasuke twice. Sasuke fortunately had 2 healers on his team, while B was ambushed by himself. The one reason why I can't put him any higher is because he did lose easily when he ended up turning into the 8 Tails. It seems like maybe the tailed beasts aren't that powerful once you reach a certain tier of shinobi that has large-scale attacks themselves. The tailed beasts just become big targets at that point. In human form, he still did wield 7 swords at the same time, which is incredible in terms of acrobatics. He outdid Sasuke in their sword fight, but once he entered into his tailed beast state, he became unstoppable. Sasuke had to paralyze him with his Mangekyo Sharingan, but that only briefly worked for some reason. After that, this form was so strong, he one-shot Sasuke with a lariat. Of course, he did not survive this encounter, but he is certainly an interesting one-off character like the Sound 5 were. He has the potential to be higher since he did so well against an honorable mention in Sasuke, but because he is just an honorable mention, I won't assume how strong he fully is. His tailed beast form is also not likely the best form he should take when fighting an Akatsuki or Kage level fighter, since many of those level of characters have defeated tailed beasts. Next at number 9 I have Jiraiya. At 8 I have Old Hiruzen, and at number 7 I have Chunin exams on Orochimaru. This means Tsunade is on the honorable mention list now. I put her below B because B's tailed beast form has a good matchup against Tsunade. The most her physical strength has allowed her to beat is Manda, but a tailed beast should be on another level than that. B's tailed beast form would also be a problem for Tsunade too. Jiraiya used to be the Sannin that was getting left behind, but now that is Tsunade, since she is the only Sannin to not have a single fight in part 2. Anyway, the reason why I put Jiraiya at 9 is that it seems like when it comes to one-on-one, Old Hiruzen was still stronger than the Sannin. Once Orochimaru lost his summons, he was instantly folded. When it comes to comparing Orochimaru and Jiraiya, we have their fights against Four-tailed Naruto to go off of. Of course, Jiraiya's was off-panel, but Four-tailed Naruto did seriously wound him and put him on the brink of death. How Jiraiya stopped the rampage is unknown. We can assume that he used the same chakra tag he gave to Kakashi. As for Orochimaru, he was cut in half cleanly, but Jiraiya was not. Granted, Jiraiya was not in Sage mode, and Orochimaru is able to regenerate anyway. The point I'm trying to make is that it seems Jiraiya is likely physically stronger than Orochimaru since he was not sliced in half, unless Four-tailed Naruto did not get as clean of a shot at him. All of the Sannin have always been as seen as a deadlock, while Hiruzen was above them since he was the strongest of all Kage at his death. Chunin exams Orochimaru was able to get to his level by learning the forbidden art of Edo Tensei, but once that was taken away, he stood no chance. It's possible that Sage Mode Jiraiya surpasses Chunin exams Orochimaru, but based on the information we have, I can't lean that way. Anyway, Jiraiya finally went all out and it did not disappoint. Unfortunately, he was fighting the leader of the Akatsuki when he did, though. Still, he did show us the power of Sage Mode, which seems to amp everything about you. I'll talk more about that when I recap the arc. Once he entered Sage Mode, he was able to take down half of the Paths of Pain without too much difficulty. He spent the entire time really confused, but there was no point in the fight where the 3 paths were really making any progress. And then when those 3 paths were revived and Jiraiya lost an arm, he was still able to take down one more path again and have the choice to escape. He still lost a pain, which just shows how much more powerful the next tier is, starting at number 6 with Minato. We finally learn the 4th Hokage's name and see him fight a little. We don't see him get pushed or fight anyone tough at all, so that's why he's just at the bottom of this tier. We learn that he can teleport by marking people or using marked kunai. Even just the idea of teleporting seems insanely powerful, so much so that Minato had a flee on sight order. The hardest challenge we saw him have was taking on 50 shinobi by himself, but this is nothing since Orochimaru could reportedly take down a small nation. This backstory still leaves us yearning for more, specifically how well he did during the Nine-Tails attack. Jiraiya even believes that Madara Uchiha was the one behind it, so did Minato possibly fight both him and the Nine-Tails? He can't be summoned through Edo Tensei, so the only hope we have is another flashback of a fight he was in. Pain is currently at 5 because we have seen him display more than Minato so far. Once he used all 6 paths, he easily defeated a Sannin. He has the potential to be at the top of this tier, considering that Jiraiya believes he is the reincarnation of the Sage of the 6 paths. We also haven't seen the leading Path of Pain fight yet, and he might be the strongest since he's the leader. His next move is hunting down the Nine-Tails, so more than likely we'll see him show all of his power and move up a few spots then. For now, though, I can only put him at 5 based on what he's shown. Next to number 4, I have Sick Itachi. We've waited a long time for Itachi to go all out, and it was even sweeter since it was against Sasuke. Now, we didn't really see him get pushed that hard, but he at least displayed all of his abilities. Physically, he's not even top 10 because once he let Sasuke out of Tsukiyomi, Sasuke damaged him a couple of times. It's his ocular jutsus that make him so strong. He could paralyze Orochimaru with his base Sharingan. He could put Sasuke under Tsukiyomi despite Sasuke having a Sharingan, and likely only let him break out because he had pushed the illusion as far as he could. His Amaterasu can burn fire itself, likely making it an unblockable ninjutsu. His Susanoo could withstand Kirin, which at least in size rivals the Rasen Shuriken. His Totsuka blade is so fast it could penetrate Orochimaru before he could even react, and it even seals him too. The 6 paths of pain were able to kill a Sannin with some effort, but Itachi effortlessly killed a Sannin. That's the main reason why I have Itachi above him, plus he's also showed off more of his powerful abilities so far. Itachi certainly lived up to his hype, and didn't even show us the full limits of his ability since he only fought Sasuke and Orochimaru sick. Next at number 3, I have Madara Uchiha and or Tobi. The goofy new member Tobi turned out to be the real leader of the Akatsuki, and even more so possibly Madara Uchiha. He does have a Sharingan, but there's no explanation for why he wears a mask. I'll be grouping these two as one person for now, but even if Tobi is not Madara, he's still on this tier. He seems to be intangible to any attack. He survived Amaterasu despite it actually touching his skin, for example. As for Madara, he ended up becoming far more powerful than we had previously speculated. So powerful he could even control the Nine Tails. B and the other Cloud Jinchuriki have shown that a full-tailed beast by himself is not that powerful, but the thought of Madara working alongside it seems like the better option. Even more merit is given to this thought if you speculate that Minato lost to Madara, but still managed to steal the Nine Tails. What's more impressive is Hashirama at 2 because he defeated Madara with the Nine Tails. The only explanation for his decent performance against Hiruzen is that it's a retcon. So for now, that is where the above Kage tier stands. Itachi, Minato, and Pain have room to grow because they haven't shown us everything they have yet. The last tier is the God of Shinobi tier, which is the Sage of the Six Paths. Jiraiya describes him as having the Rinnegan and crafting all jutsus. He seems to be some ancient being that has evolved into a tall tale. I still think that the story is credible enough though, and if he possesses all jutsu then he deserves the number 1 spot. Pain may end up moving up to this tier too since he has the Rinnegan as well. With all that finally being said, I can add another honorable mention. I feel like Sasuke deserves this since he did defeat a tailed beast after all. Things didn't go well before that Amaterasu, but he seems to be getting more adept with his Mangekyo just like his Sharingan in part 1. If he ends up unlocking all of Itachi's abilities, he would likely shoot up far up the ranking as a result. One more thing to mention about him is Kirin, which is by far the most powerful lightning jutsu. Now to recap the arc before the next one. These arcs expanded on power like almost no other. B showed us tailed beast bombs, which might be the most destructive ability in the series. He also showed us some of the best physical feats in the series. Jiraiya showed us Sage Mode, which is the novel ability. Fukasaku has described it as using nature energy, and it just seems like a major power-up. Jiraiya's Rasengan got exponentially bigger, and his physical prowess reached a new level too. It also gives you some access to hacks such as the auditory genjutsu that defeated the 3 Paths of Pain. Naruto is due to become the next Sage Mode user, which is likely going to shoot him way up the rankings just like Sasuke when he develops his Mangekyo. Minato didn't show us as much as I had hoped, but the ability to teleport is another novel ability. It seems like the ultimate defense and possibly the ultimate offense. Pain might be the most unorthodox fighter we've seen so far. 6 bodies that share the same vision is a nightmare matchup. One can summon almost any animal they want, another can absorb ninjutsu, and another can presumably revive a dead path. The leader hasn't even shown his ability yet. More than likely, the other paths have odd powers too, but as for raw power, we're yet to see much of it. Most importantly, he shows us a new dojutsu in the Rinnegan. Itachi shows us the true power of the Mangekyo, which seems unrivaled as of now. An exoskeleton that can survive Kirin and easily defeat a Sannin. Genjutsu with no known bounds, and a black fire that burns fire and defeats tailed beast is matched by no other. Except of course Tobi and or Madara, since he did survive Amaterasu unscathed and can control the Nine Tails. Hashirama is a level above though, since he can defeat those 2 forces working together at the same time. His wood style should be much larger in scale than he had previously shown. And then the Sage of the Six Paths is some mysterious figure that we know next to nothing about. The last arc for this list will be the Pain's Assault arc. I've said before on this channel that I personally see Naruto as a 3-part series, with part 2 being split between this arc and the Kage Summit. This is because this arc resolves so many conflicts and starts so many new storylines for us to explore. The Akatsuki have been dealt with for the time being and are now having to completely change their plan going forward. Sasuke versus Itachi has been resolved, and now Sasuke's desire to destroy the Leaf Village is the new conflict for him. Naruto grew strong enough to take on the Akatsuki by himself, and now has finally been accepted by the village. The list goes on, but also if you divide it by chapters, these 3 parts are near equal in length. Anyway, the one technicality for this list is that there will be no Hanzo on it. In the anime, we do see him beating up on the Sannin, but in the manga, all we get is this cold panel where he stares him down. There's no other context to this, so there's just not enough information to go off of. It's possible that he joined the fight late since he seems unscathed, whereas Jiraiya is so tired that he's being held up by Tsunade. It's also possible that the Sannin aren't as strong as they are now too.
They also could have not been going all out since not a single summon is in sight, nor is Jiraiya in Sage mode. There's just too many questions for me to add him, but if we absolutely highball him, you could put him ahead of Orochimaru. Anyway, the two changes I made were Pain and Itachi switching places, along with Naruto entering in at number 7. Naruto all the way at number 7 is shaky for me, but it is ultimately my conjecture. Fukasaku says Naruto surpassed Jiraiya in Sage mode, but that does not mean he surpassed Jiraiya overall. It is much easier for Naruto to enter it, which is something to consider. Jiraiya also only defeated 3 paths of Pain without intel, whereas Naruto defeated 5 with intel before the Diva Path pinned him. Which feat is more impressive is based on how valuable you think that intel is. What's arguably more impressive is that Naruto beat the Diva Path in a one-on-one. Of course, the Diva Path was not trying to kill him, but he did say he was going to take Naruto to the brink of death. Naruto ended up countering Almighty Push by himself, and defeated the Diva Path with a base Rasengan. All of that justifies him surpassing the Sannin for me. It's not concrete, but it's where I lean. As for Pain, just the sheer scale to his jutsu is the most we've seen in action so far. He could flatten the entire Leaf Village in one move, and then go on to use Planetary Devastation to contain the Ninetales briefly. He did fail to contain half the Ninetales, while Madara could presumably control the full Ninetales. So that prevents Pain from moving up to that tier of fighter. It also turns out that he's not a Sage at the 6th pass level because of that. Hanzo is the only honorable mention, so I can move on to the arc recap now. This arc was a long time coming for Naruto. The end of the Akatsuki suppression arc was nice, but this was the first arc in part 2 where we really got to see him fight and do well. And the Rasen Shuriken return, which was great. As for Pain, he's the most powerful antagonist we've seen in a real fight so far. The almighty push that destroyed the Leaf and Planetary Devastation really upped the bar for how powerful someone could be in the series. There are others that are presumably stronger, but he is the highest in the list we've seen fight. Aside from his attack power, he also has the most unorthodox abilities in the series. We also saw the Ninetales show a little bit of what it's capable of, and it didn't disappoint. It was stopped before it fully transformed, but even a fraction of its power was too strong to be bound by Pain's most powerful jutsu. We also learned from Minato that Tobi and or Madara did in fact fight him with the Ninetales. Going forward, we're left wondering what's next for both Sasuke and the Akatsuki. Sasuke wants to destroy the Leaf Village, and he's likely going to approach Itachi levels of power soon. Tobi is going to have a change of plans now since Pain betrayed him. All the Kage are supposed to be meeting too, so that should be a major world-building moment in the show. The list has gotten pretty stiff in competition at this point though, so we'll see if any of the Kage make their way onto the list. That's where I'll leave it for cliffhanger, so I'll go ahead and recap part 2 now. There were 19 total characters that made the list this time around, which is 2 less than in part 1. Once again, 9 characters stayed on the list after making it, with 4 being on each and every list. Jiraiya was the first one to mount a comeback onto a list, period. The entirety of Team 7 was on the Land of Waves arc list, but by the kazekage rescue arc, Kakashi had gradually fallen off all the way off the list. Surprisingly, Naruto was the first one to make it back on. I had anticipated Sasuke would be, since he was stronger than Naruto all the way up to the last arc. I would expect him to shoot up the list once he fully develops his Mangekyo. That's really all I have to say for this video though. Once again, big shout out to TG for making the graphics for this video. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos in the future. Comment something if you have something to say. And thank y'all for watching, and I guess I'll see y'all next time.